Discover what it's like to feel better. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF and save on your first order. That's 1-800-4RELIEF.
With Progressive's Name Your Price tool, you can easily find coverage options that fit your budget. If only it was that easy to name your baby.
How about Jaden?
Nope.
Okay. Michael?
Went to middle school with a glue-eating Michael.
Sebastian?
Dated one in college.
How about Damien?
Vampire name.
All right. Greg?
Not feeling it.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Jeffrey?
Oh, love that one.
Wait, really?
No.
Find coverage options that fit your budget with Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
5.
Here's the Wall Street Business Report.
Stocks rose again, continuing Wall Street's record-setting run. The S&P 500 climbed 1%, setting an all-time high for the 37th time this year, and marking its first close above 5,600 points. Big technology companies led the way again after a major chip supplier reported how much its revenue jumped in June. A frenzy around artificial intelligence technology has been a major reason the U.S. stock market has climbed to records this year and has had hopes of coming cuts to interest rates. The Dow gained 429 points, closing at 39,721. The Nasdaq was up 218 to 18,647. The S&P added 57 points to 5633. New York oil rose 69 cents to $82.10 per barrel. For the Wall Street Business Report, I'm John Scott.
News and analysis at townhall.com.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
Here's tonight's forecast. We'll have a low this evening of 75. Tomorrow, look for a bit less humidity. Still hot, the high is 95, but a lower heat index. It'll be a mix of sun and clouds, and again, a 20% chance we get showers in the afternoon. So Friday, that looks like our best chance for showers, a 50% opportunity of rain, and a cold front, high of only 88. I'm Cal Moss with your On Point local weather.
WQXL Columbia, W264DF.
Grills, outdoor kitchens, fireplaces. Summer sizzle starts with Bart. This is 107 The Point. Please press button now. No, number 1.
This is Sports Talk with Phil Kornblut and Chris Bergen. Sports Talk is heard across the state on radio affiliates of the Sports Talk Media Network and is streaming live on SportsTalkSC.com, as well as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. The South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number to call in is 888-898-2525. That's 888-898-2525. Now, here are Phil and Chris with tonight's edition of Sports Talk.
So Clemson and Florida State to the Big 12. Not sure I quite had that on my conference expansion bingo card for this Wednesday. Hi, folks, and welcome inside another edition of Sports Talk Media Network on just a steamy, miserably hot day across the state of South Carolina, but that sets us up nicely because we've got a hot Wednesday night show for you, try and keep you cool as best we can. Chris Bergen over here sweltering in Sardis. Meantime, I'm sure Josh Cohen doing the same down in Columbia, where it's never cool. It's famously hot. And maybe with the ocean sea breeze, just a touch cool along the Grand Strand, where Matt Smith joins us tonight as Smitty takes over for Phil Kornblut, who's still out on vacation. Korn will rejoin us in Dallas, Texas next Monday for SEC Media Days. 888-898-2525 if you'd like to be a part of the show here tonight. We've got plenty of news notes to hit on. We've got time for your phone calls. Also coming up on the program just after 6:30, our good friend MJ Ward from Golf Today. Of course, he is our golf insider. Mentioned earlier this week that Keegan Bradley has been named the United States Ryder Cup captain for next season, and we will get to MJ's take on that and also start looking forward to next weekend, the final major of the year in professional golf, the British Open that'll take place across the pond. So we'll get MJ's take on that and all things golf just after 6:30. Also, Josh Brown, former Gamecock kicker, now working with a good sponsor of ours, Lawyer Lisa. We'll get his take on the upcoming SEC Media Days and find out what all is going on in his business life as well, since he has moved on from the sport of football. Still a huge fan, but we'll get Josh's take on that. And maybe if we have some time tonight, if not, We'll certainly get to it tomorrow. Was over in Conway a bit earlier today. Had a chance to check out Justin Gray, first-year head men's basketball coach at CCU, his team practicing. And I got a chance to catch up with him for a little while. He's been on the job about 4 months now since taking over for the Hall of Famer Cliff Ellis. So we will get Justin Gray's take on things and how things are progressing. I can give you one positive note for you Coastal Carolina fans. The intensity level, if that translates to a really good basketball team, Smitty, Coastal may go undefeated, because what I saw in practice today, my gracious, those guys are getting after it. And I was joking with Coach and said, normally when you and I and Coach Gray, when he was playing at Wake Forest, normally October 15th was the day that everybody looked forward to. It's sort of a national basketball holiday in college hoops. That was the first official day of practice. I don't know when the first official day of practice is anymore in college hoops, because the season never ends. As soon as they get done with the Final Four in late March, early April, the teams are back at it for what they call, the one-on-one individual workouts that turn into summer practices, that turn into fall camp, and then turn into the regular season. So, but like I said, the intensity level ratcheted up considerably. Now, it's July the 10th, so you have to kind of measure expectations. How will that translate to December 10th and January 10th, I guess, remains to be seen. But it was eye-opening for me to sit down and watch them, because tell you what, they were getting after it on a hot day over in Conway.
Yeah, a little too warm for me to be out there doing that. I'd have pulled up lame today for Coach. But, as you said, the new world, they just continue to expand these calendars further and further out. So I'm not surprised that they're practicing in mid-season form, even though it's, mid-July.
And they're having to practice right now in the old arena, the Kimball Arena, which is considerably smaller than their current setup at the HTC Center, because they're doing some work on, I believe, the basketball playing surface in Conway at the HTC Center. So they're inside. It's really funny, too, because one thing he does stress is talking. And he wants his team, even if you're not in the game, he wants you talking on the bench. So the one thing that Kimball does not possess is really good acoustics. So it gets really, really loud in there, considering there were 15, 20 kids in there practicing. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun today. But a good interview with Coach Gray. We'll try and bring that to you either tonight or tomorrow. All right, 888-898-2525. But we've got to kick it off with the big news of the day, and a lot of it surrounds Clemson, Smitty. And let's start with the ruling that actually went in favor of the Atlantic Coast Conference in the ongoing legal battles between the Tigers, the Seminoles, and the ACC. John Blau reporting that Judge Lewis A. Bledsoe in Mecklenburg County has not granted Clemson's motions to stay the ACC's case against the university in full. But he does, however, dismiss several parts of the ACC's complaint. Now, I did not go to law school. Probably should get lawyer Lisa on here right now, Smitty, and we can get her to help us out here with the legalese. I have watched enough Matlock and Law and Order over the years. I didn't realize it would help me out on down the road in terms of covering sports. But here's what John reports that was in the ACC's complaint. The court has granted Clemson's motion to dismiss as to the ACC's first claim for relief, to the extent that claim seeks a declaration that the grant of rights agreements are, quote, valid and binding contracts supported by good and adequate consideration, end quote. The ACC's second claim for relief based on quasi-estoppel and waiver. Now, I had to look up what estoppel means, and that is an equitable doctrine that prevents a person from denying an act or assertion if such denial is deemed to bring harm to another who reasonably relied on the act or assertion. Stop me there if you understand what the heck I just read.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to follow, Chris, but I believe what you were saying is that the ACC needs to act in Clemson's best interest, and Clemson needs to act in the ACC's best interest, right? So when you move forward with the grant of rights negotiation with, say, a media rights partner like ESPN, it is up to the ACC to do its best on behalf of Clemson to get the best deal possible. Now, I'll let you I'll let you go ahead and continue, but I want to bring something up that I have that I knew about, but I guess I'd say I'd forgotten about this court case. So you go on and please do your best to get through the Latin in this and then explain it to us. And then I'm going to bring a point. I'll bring kind of a counterpoint that I have not brought up since I've been filling in for Phil that I think is an important footnote here.
Josh, you may want to get my dad on the phone. He actually took Latin in college. It may help here in the next couple of minutes, especially with quasi-estoppel. Anyway, the ACC's fourth claim for relief was also dismissed for breach of contract, and the ACC's sixth claim for relief for breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing in the ACC's Constitution and bylaws, and those claims are hereby dismissed without prejudice. Now, the Atlantic Coast Conference released a statement following the ruling today in North Carolina where they anticipated to get a favorable judge, and obviously they did in Mecklenburg County. The ACC saying, quote, "We are pleased with today's ruling as it confirms that only a North Carolina court can render a decision that will apply to both Clemson and Florida State. The opinion also reinforces what the ACC has clearly articulated from day one. The North Carolina courts are the proper place to enforce and interpret the ACC's agreements," end quote. As the court found, Clemson does not challenge whether the ACC's grant of rights is valid or enforceable. This recognizes the ACC's consistent position that the 2013 and also the 2016 grant of rights are valid and enforceable agreements that each of our members entered into voluntarily with full knowledge of their terms, end quote. I turned it over to the only person on the panel who has a doctorate of jurisprudence. Smitty, what you got?
Oh no! There's far too much here that I don't understand. But what we do know is the judge in North Carolina dismissed Clemson, the stay there in North Carolina, meaning the case, the court will rule there in North Carolina. Clemson could have gotten all of this dismissed, and then everybody would have turned their attention to the court in Pickens County, where Clemson has filed against the ACC. But this judge has ruled that he will indeed, even though he dismissed parts of the ACC's filing against Clemson, that he will indeed rule on this case in North Carolina. And the reasoning being, I read a little bit more on this to try to extrapolate some of this, that they believe that will limit the confusion in the end. But you can see, by the way, I do know one legal term in there, dismissed without prejudice, which means these charges can be refiled. Oh, boy. So what are we dealing with now? Clemson is going to pursue its case against the ACC in Pickens. The judge in North Carolina is absolutely positively going to rule on this case in North Carolina in Mecklenburg County, home of the ACC offices. Florida State has a pending case against the ACC in Florida. Okay. Somebody is going to have to rule on this in the end, and who has jurisdiction over another, which one of these court cases, if they conflict, and they likely will, is going to overrule the other, which means I think this is going to be a drawn out process. And the thing I wanted to bring up as a footnote here that I had failed to mention in our conversation last week with John Blau, and I should have, because I said, I thought the ACC looked like on paper had some advantages here, at least from a legal standpoint, that at least if we're trying to make sense of all of this as laypersons, that it looks like you might even be pulling for Clemson to get out of its deal with the ACC. But it looked like on its face that the ACC had some pretty good standing. But I had not forgotten necessarily, just failed to bring up, and I want to bring it up now to you, Chris, as a reminder. John Swofford was the commissioner of the ACC when this deal was many of these deals were penned with ESPN and others, but they carved out a section of the grant of rights for Raycom. You remember Raycom Sports?
Oh, the good old Raycom days. I miss those days. I really do.
At the time that the grant of rights, that Raycom was brought into the conversation, and so they took some of the games away from ESPN and gave them to Raycom, a regional network. At that time, John Swofford's son, Chad Swofford, worked for Raycom and eventually became the company's vice president and general manager. They got some Tier 2 and Tier 3 rights for $50 million annually. So, in other words, Clemson and Florida State are suggesting Raycom did not, that's more than they deserved or whatever. Whatever. The point is, Raycom got a sweetheart deal, and they got that sweetheart deal because John Swofford was in the room and he knew his son worked for Raycom. I don't know that that's true. I'm just saying that's a point I have not brought up, and I had left out of some of these discussions, but I think it's worth illuminating here because I think that makes the ACC look pretty bad and not quite as good as they did a couple weeks ago when this court case was first started to be discussed.
I would agree. I really would. And the ACC Media Days, we are about 10 days away. It's week after next. SEC is up next week. The Big 12 has been going on this weekend. There has been a newsy Big 12 Media Days coming out of Las Vegas that we'll get into in just a second. But when the ACC Media Days show up, Smitty, I'm beginning to wonder, and I fully believe this may be the most attended ACC, what do they call it, ACC kickoff. They don't call it ACC Media Days in history. And I'm not talking about all the Dallas media that's coming to follow SMU and any media from California that may actually have some interest to coming cover it from Stanford. I'm thinking because of everything going on outside the league, has nothing to do with the football teams. I mean, whether or not Clemson can beat Florida State in Tallahassee is going to be a footnote to all the legal stuff going on. And also this news that came out last night that we'll get into momentarily about maybe the SEC and the Big Ten are not landing spots for either one of those schools. I don't know how Dabo Swinney and Mike Norvell are going to handle the amount of questions lobbed at them that have nothing to do with their football teams.
Right. No, I would agree with that. I think they're going to just turn the focus right back to their football teams because Coach Sweeney's MO throughout this has been, look, that's above my pay grade. I can't deal with it. I can't comment on it. I'm sure that's what Graham Neff has encouraged Dabo Swinney to do because really no good can come of Dabo Swinney talking about this, right? Because it looks like, as you say, Clemson is on its way out. There's going to be a divorce. Florida State and Clemson are going to break away. And as you just mentioned, you said who had Clemson and Florida State to the Big 12 on their bingo card. I have asked this question, I do not know how many times, doing the show with you and Phil and even off the air. Do we know where Clemson and Florida State would land? And the assumption had been, because I think so many Clemson fans were desirous of joining the SEC with its large payout and with its tradition of Southern football that Clemson feels like, well, they rightly fit into, and they do culturally. No qualms there, and I don't think anyone would say that Clemson doesn't fit into the SEC culturally. And as a football-first institution, like many of the SEC teams of old, but the SEC may not exactly have room for them because from their perspective, they already have a big dog in Florida, in the Florida Gators, and so they may not have room for Florida State with already 16 teams. And if you look at television, yes, Clemson absolutely has a great, ravenous fan base that extends outside of South Carolina. Absolutely it does. But if you look at what Clemson brings to the table, most of it would be duplicating what the SEC already has. Clemson argues, well, we've got a great following in Atlanta, and then then the SEC would say, well, that's great, but we already have a lot of Georgia and Auburn fans in the city of Atlanta. And Clemson might say, yes, but we're nationally known now. And they said, well, we already have some major brands like Texas and Alabama and Georgia and LSU. And Clemson said, well, we're a great rival to South Carolina. And the SEC could say, we already have enough major rivalry games, and it's our position that you and South Carolina would continue to play even if you didn't join our conference. And we'll get that game every other year as part of our television package. So I think, I'm just pointing out, I know Clemson fans may not want to hear that, but I've thought that it is not a done deal that Clemson would land in the SEC or even the Big Ten because of, now they aren't necessarily a fit culturally into the Big Ten. So I'm not floored by this. This is a reality I thought that Clemson may be presented with at some point. And to me, I'd volley back to you. Is there any chance that Clemson and Florida State could even be football independents in the future rather than just jumping into, or maybe trying to form their own conference? Maybe if they leave together with Florida State and they are successful in getting out and they can lessen the blow financially and they get out, what if they call North Carolina and Duke and Virginia Tech and Miami and say, why don't we just do some kind of 6 to 8 team conference that's some sort of southeastern renegade conference, and we'll go negotiate with the ESPN?
It's a fascinating question. I fear, though, a lot of those schools, if that were the case, I think Florida State and Clemson would be left out on an island because those schools would look, it's the devil we know versus the devil that's unknown, that we don't know. Now, Greg Swaim, who is a reporter that is covering recruiting for a long, long time in college scouting, he's got a fascinating tweet that came out after we got off the show last night about Clemson and Florida State. We'll delve into that next here on Sports Talk.
Major Billy Downer here from the Department of Natural Resources, and DNR is excited to announce the implementation of Go Outdoors SC, a new online licensing and boat titling system that you can access right from your phone. Through this new system, customers can purchase their hunting and fishing licenses, renew their boat, apply for lottery opportunities, and complete electronic harvest reporting requirements. For more information, visit Go Outdoors SC at your local app store.
I'm attorney Jim Corbett. I'm not a case manager. I'm a lawyer for over 35 years. I don't charge 40% for your injury in your wreck case or any on-the-job injury. Call 803-765-2968 and ask for Jim Corbett, or email me, jim@jimcorbettattorney.com, for the experience of a lawyer handling your injury case. Jim Corbett, 803-765-2968. Jim@jimcorbettattorney.com. Put 35 years of experience to work on your injury case.
Stay tuned. More Sports Talk is coming up on the Sports Talk Media Network. If you're looking to stay hydrated this summer, turn toward a southern favorite, sweet South Carolina watermelons. One slice is equivalent to a glass of water and is just as effective as sports drinks for hydration. If you don't believe us, you can ask the Palmetto State's top football teams. The SC Watermelon Association will be serving up slices after summer practice to keep us fueled and hydrated. Visit scwatermelon.org for all the details and look for ripe South Carolina watermelons in your hometown.
The South Carolina Education Lottery has a new rolling jackpot, and trust me, our state hasn't seen anything this big before.
How big? Harbortown Lighthouse big?
Bigger.
Bigger than the Ravenel Bridge?
Even bigger.
Not bigger than Table Rock.
With this new rolling jackpot, Palmetto Cash 5 is officially too big to ignore. Palmetto Cash 5 draws nightly, so play today. Check if your numbers are winners in the Players Club app or at sceducation.com. Overall odds are 1 in 10. Top prize odds are 1 in 850,668.
George Bryant here for Tsunami Bar Sports, and some say the fun is in the winning. I say the fun is in the training. And Tsunami Robbie, what do you say?
George, we all know you get more done when you're having fun. This technology is different, it's engaging, but it's also a lot of fun to use.
Hi, this is Phil Kornblut. Be sure to click on the digital ad on SportsTalkSC.com and get 5% off any Tsunami Bar order using promo code BBB5. Don't wait, order today.
Wednesday night here on Sports Talk. Chris, Smitty, and Josh with you this evening up until 8 o'clock. You can be a part of the festivities at 888-898-2525. Your phone calls to come. MJ Ward right around the corner. Talk about Keegan Bradley being named the United States Ryder Cup captain, and also start looking forward to next weekend's British Open. Talking Clemson football, though, right out of the starting blocks here tonight. And Smitty, if the legal part of the equation wasn't interesting enough, Greg Swaim, who is a reporter that has covered recruiting and scouting, collegiate scouting and the like for a long, long time. I'm assuming it appears he's based out in Oklahoma. Runs his own Twitter page at Greg Swaim Show. And right after we got off the air last night, he had a breaking piece of information. I'm going to take it at face value, take it for what it's worth. It is conference expansion news, so take that for what it's worth. But as he tweets, as we've said for a year, Florida State and Clemson will not get a Big Ten offer due to neither being AAU accredited. But from Vegas, where the Big 12 Media Days are currently taking place, Greg Swaim adds, the talk is the SEC has now turned the pair down. With new sponsorship, the Big 12 probably won't pay quite what the other two do, but with those two, they'll pay double what the Atlantic Coast Conference does. And here's the fascinating point. If that's not fascinating enough, Smitty, he goes on to write that won't end conference expansion for the Big 12. The talk is they will actually take 6 teams from the Atlantic Coast Conference. So my guess is the teams you just ran through, The North Carolinas, the Virginias, the Virginia Techs of the world may join, if Greg is correct in his assumption, may join Florida State and Clemson in a much, much bigger Big 12.
Yes, so that was kind of what I was hinting towards, and I hope that I was clear in my meaning that the Big 12 is a fascinating landing spot. But Chris, I don't know if is it the same for everybody? In other words, we said North Carolina. I think North Carolina, even though Florida State and Clemson are not going to the Big Ten because they're not AAU accredited, and I think we don't have to dig into the fact that we know they are not an ideal fit for the Big Ten. But you know who might be, and I should have mentioned this in the last segment. What about North Carolina? If the Big Ten is going to expand southward, there's no room for Clemson and Florida State, but I could see them making an exception and coming for North Carolina and Virginia, who I'm going to guess are AAU accredited. I don't know that to be certain.
Miami might be another interesting one, too.
Miami as well, because some of these how about Duke? How about Duke, which is a high academic university? I think that would be fascinating, and so I don't know what it would look like if Clemson and Florida State, who those other teams might be, maybe Louisville. I don't think so. The Big 12 currently, I'm trying to think and run through all the teams in my head that they have. But then the other factor here is even after whatever teams the Big 12 may try to add, which, by the way, currently the payout for the Big 12 is similar to what it is to the ACC. I think there's less than $1 million difference currently. But besides that point, how big can a conference get? What are you going to do?
It's a really good question.
If you have 20
when is too
teams,
much? Yeah.
You have to break into divisions at that point, right? Clemson can't be playing Arizona and Arizona State every other year. That can't happen. So they'd have to come up with a plan that made sense. And they would have to be able to entice teams like Clemson and Florida State, I think, with something bigger than they have currently, which is why I brought it up. I'm just wondering, is there any world that Clemson or Florida State would try to operate as football independents, which is not an easy road to hoe in this era of the 12-team playoff, because it's not, Notre Dame is kind of written in there, but the rest of the independents, it's a difficult way to go.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think this may by far be the most attended ACC kickoff, and the interesting things will have nothing to do with what occurs between September and December in the league on the football field.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
It's forecast this evening of 75. Tomorrow, look for a bit less humidity. Still hot, the high is 95, but a lower heat index. It'll be a mix of sun and clouds, and again, a 20% chance we get showers in the afternoon. So Friday, that looks like our best chance for showers, a 50% opportunity of rain, and a cold front, high of only 88. I'm Cal Moss with your On Point local weather.
At Palmetto State Armory, we offer the largest selection of guns and ammunition at unbeatable prices. Our knowledgeable and friendly staff are here to provide personalized assistance, ensuring you find exactly what you need. If you enjoy outdoor activities like hunting, camping, or hiking, clothing and outdoor gear collection has got you covered. We also feature an exceptional indoor range facility where you can experience the thrill of shooting in a safe and controlled environment. Visit us today at PalmettoStateArmory.com or your local retail store. Palmetto State Armory, American made for life.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters reporting NATO says Ukraine is on an irreversible path to membership in the military alliance. It advances assurances that Ukraine will be allowed to join the Western military coalition, but only after its war with Russia ends. In another boost, the U.S., the Netherlands, and Denmark announced Wednesday that the first NATO-provided F-16s are on their way to Ukraine. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell reinforced a message that the Fed is paying growing attention to a slowing job market and not only to taming inflation, a shift that signals it's likely to begin cutting interest rates soon. We're not just an inflation-targeting central bank, Powell told the House Financial Services Committee on the second of 2 days of semi-annual testimony to Congress. On Wall Street, the Dow by 429 points. This is SRN News.
I sure like to brag about good local businesses. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning is a great local biz. Josh and his team stress customer service as their top priority. Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning came out to my house. I had a toilet that wasn't working right, a garbage disposal that died. They came out right on time, told me everything they were going to do, and explained the price of each repair before even bringing in the tools. I knew exactly what I was getting and exactly what it would cost. Their prices are fair, their team is courteous and professional, plus they did a great job fixing what needed in my home. I am very careful about making any recommendations, and I'm thrilled and confident to suggest you call Franklin Plumbing and Drain Cleaning for any plumbing needs. If it's a repair or to replace something, if it's that tankless water heater that you've always wanted to give you that endless hot water and save you some money. They unclog drain and sewer lines and so much more. Online, you'll find them at franklinplumbing.sc.com or just give Josh and those great folks a phone call, 799-2222. That's 799-2222, and tell them you heard about them from here at The Point.
Hey y'all, this is Ted from Flight Deck Restaurant. We'd like to invite you and your family to dine with us. It's a great menu that's sure to please your whole family. We have fresh cooked burgers, big juicy wings, blue plate menu featuring country cooking, oven baked hoagies, fresh crisp salads, authentic Greek food like gyros, souvlaki, and baklava. We also carry 20 different premium cheesecakes and pies. Flight Deck Restaurant also has an arcade with 30 different games like Star Wars, Batman, Skee Ball, Bass Wheel, Pac-Man, Galaga, and so much more. Flight Deck, your favorite family restaurant. Thanks y'all and God bless.
Excuse me, would you like some expert advice on how to reduce your energy usage and save money?
Absolutely.
Did you know that Dominion Energy offers its residential electric customers a free home checkup?
Really? What's included?
A customized energy report and free installation of energy-saving products for eligible customers.
Does it take long?
An hour or two at most.
So, how do I sign up?
Go to DominionEnergySC.com and click Save Energy.
DominionEnergySC.com. Here I come. Thanks for the tip.
Certain restrictions apply.
As we celebrate 10 fantastic years at Sweet Comfort Services, we're cooling you off with unbeatable deals on all SEER 2 and high-efficiency AC equipment. Hey, Point family, mention this ad and get a thorough spring maintenance check from our expert non-commissioned techs for just $95 per system and a chill $45 each additional system. Look us up at sweethvac.com or call us at 331-8143. Celebrating a decade of keeping you cool and comfy. That's the Sweet Comfort promise.
Breathe fresh life into your home with Lake Murray Soft Wash. Our team specializes in power washing, soft washing, and restoration. From roof cleaning to wood and concrete washdowns, we've got you covered. For top-notch, affordable services that you can trust, call now, 528-1996, or log on to LakeMurraySoftWash.com. We're not just professionals, we're your neighbors. Whether residential or commercial, Lake Murray Soft Wash sets the standard in cleaning. Embrace the sparkling difference today.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me.
Wednesday night edition of Sports Talk, Sports Network. Chris Bergen with you here tonight from Stardust. Meantime, Matt Smith over in Georgetown and Josh Cohen ready to line you up back home in Columbia. 888-898-2525. We'll have room for your phone calls coming up in a little while. We'll get back into the Clemson discussion, plus some other major news notes that we want to hit on today. But in the meantime, of course, coming up next week, the final major of the golf season will take place overseas with the British Open, and kind enough to join us with a sneak preview of the British Open, but more so the announcement earlier this week that the United States has named its Ryder Cup captain for next year, and it's Keegan Bradley, somewhat of a surprise, as we welcome in our golf insider from Golf Today, MJ Ward, joins us tonight here on Sports Talk. MJ, how are you on this hot Wednesday night?
Well, it's good to be with you guys, and there's never a dull moment in the golf lane as we reach the pinnacle of it with next week's Open Championship. But certainly the Ryder Cup announcement was really a surprise as well.
Well, I'm glad you thought so, because I fully anticipated it would be one of two people, and Keegan Bradley was not one of them. I thought maybe Phil Mickelson would get a chance. Certainly Tiger Woods would be in consideration. You said it was a surprise. Why was it a surprise to you that Keegan Bradley was named the captain?
Well, I mean, if you go back to pre-pandemic and pre-live, I think it was probably almost an absolute given that the 25 Ryder Cup at Bethpage would have had Phil Mickelson as captain. And And I think it would be fair to say that the Mickelson-Woods situation would have resulted in them having be captains for one home match and one away match. And when Liv happened, Phil took himself completely out. That ship has sailed. There's no return for Phil. I just don't see ever being a captain. He literally burned his bridges. With Tiger, it's hard to say, because his record, what he's done in golf. Obviously, he won the first publicly played U.S. Open at Bethpage in 2002. Essentially, the PGA of America, they were going after him, like a guy is going after a gal for a prom night. I mean, they were determined to see if they could get him, and they were going to push it as far and as long as they could. And then it just became, an impossibility because there are time complications if you drag this out much further. So, I didn't see Keegan Bradley. I thought Stuart Sink possibly had a chance to be picked because he was a vice captain and they had gone that route previously. I didn't see people like Steve Stricker or Davis Love or Fred Couples because, basically you're just rewinding the clock to an era that has now really passed on, or Jim Furyk even. So, but picking Bradley, yeah, that's a reach for a lot of different reasons.
Well, before we get further into Keegan Bradley, Tiger Woods obviously a major name and cast a shadow over the last 2 decades in golf. Why do you think it didn't work out? It sounds like ultimately Tiger Woods said no. Why would Tiger Woods say no to an honor like this?
Well, I mean, you have to go by let me put it this way. There's probably the real reason, and then there's the stated reason. In his statement that he gave, and it was read at the press event yesterday in Manhattan, it really came down to his time availability and what he feels he can give in terms of his time. He's on the advisory board for the tour. He's obviously taken an active role in what the ongoing discussions are with Liv, and then more importantly, how the PGA Tour will be structured going forward between the guys who are at the elite level and then the average players, or I should say average players. I mean, there's highly skilled players, but the bulk of the rest of the field. So I think it was a question of the time. There's no way to know how Tiger could have fit this in or not fit it in because, his name still carries obviously a tremendous amount of weight. Clearly the PGA of America was going to wait it out and take as long as necessary to see what they could do to get him to commit to it. But it's interesting that when he fell out of the mix, they had to come up with something really quick. And the way it was explained at the press conference, and I think it makes all the sense logically, but I think the question comes down to does Keegan Bradley have the goods to deliver as a captain? And, there's no way to know the answer to that until the matches are being concluded. I can give you examples of people. I mean, frankly, Paul McGinley being picked years back, not too many years ago, about 10 years ago, 2014, I believe, at Glen Eagles. I mean, to be captain, Paul McGinley's record compared to the All-Stars that the Europeans had previously as their captains, whether it be Seve Ballesteros or Bernhard Langer or Ian Woosnam, he was not really a high player in the pantheon of wins and losses. Keegan Bradley has a better record than Paul McGinley, but at the same time, Keegan Bradley as a marquee, no, it's not going to be anything close to Tiger Woods or even a Phil Mickelson if he was still eligible. So it'll be interesting to see how Keegan Bradley works his way through this minefield and being a captain, because I will tell you this, his legacy will be marked based on what happens with this Ryder Cup. I mean, unless he wins other golf tournaments in his career, possibly that could happen. He's still active as a player, but his legacy is going to be really pinned down to how this turns out at Bethpage in about 14 months.
Our golf insider from Golf Today, MJ Ward, joining us here tonight on Sports Talk and looking back on the selection, somewhat curious selection of Keegan Bradley as the United States Ryder Cup champion. And One thing he's going to have to change is momentum, right, MJ, because the Europeans have won 5 of the last 7, 8 of the last 11 against the Americans. How much impact, though, can a captain have? Or is it finally just going to boil down to like every other sport? If the players don't play well, regardless who's coaching them, they're not going to win.
Well, that's very true. Everything you just said is absolutely true. I mean, the captain doesn't hit a shot. It's the players who play. But I think you have to get players prepared. What we found now in the Ryder Cup now over the last probably 4 or 5 matches now, the home team has had a tremendous advantage, and the differentiation between the teams, the point spreads over the last 4 or 5 matches, we haven't had any real close ones in quite some time. And the home team situation is unique. I will tell you, I've played Bethpage all my life. I'm very familiar with the facility. I will tell you that the Europeans, they better bring their earmuffs with them when they get there, because they will never hear a crowd like what they're going to face. My only concern is that the security measures need to be really tightened up because of what happened at the Travelers event a few weeks ago. You can't have situations like that happen. I'm sure they're very aware of this, and I'm sure they're going to make sure that the precautions are taken. But in terms of getting players ready, I just think that Keegan, I think what a captain has to do basically is kind of work through the personalities of the players that you have and then get as much feedback from them as possible so that they're in as much comfort zone as one can possibly be. You have to keep this in mind with a Ryder Cup. I mean, it'll be played in late September of next year. So there will be a space of time between when the Tour Championship finishes up on Labor Day and then when the Ryder Cup is being played. So there's a lot of different variations here about what players should be picked. It'll be interesting to see what Keegan Bradley does on his captain's picks. I mean, the 6 players that go in automatically, he has no role to play with that, besides obviously knowing who they are. But the 6 captain's picks and who he picks as his vice captains, that's all going to set the terms of the atmosphere. But make no mistake about it. I mean, the Europeans, to play them, even on home soil, is going to take an effort to win, because we are now past the Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Jim Furyk. That whole show has now come to an end, and now we're into this next wave. So I would not be surprised if Keegan goes with some of the younger players that you're seeing emerge. I mean, clearly there's, some of the heavyweights like, for example, Scotty Scheffler and Colin Morikawa. I mean, you have them, at the top. It'll be interesting to see what he does with live players. I mean, I know Keegan at the press conference yesterday, he mentioned that I'm going to take the best players, is what he said. So a guy like Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, who knows if Dustin Johnson is back in form. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. The captain's real function is making sure that all of the distractions and all of the, what I call the byplay stuff that goes on, is taken care of, and make sure that the players are ready to play. At that point, that's all you can do. And then it's up to the players to play.
You mentioned how noisy it will be at Bethpage next year for the Ryder Cup. It almost reminiscent of the War by the Shore, Kiowa. That's when I first really started digging into and enjoying the Ryder Cup so many years ago. The United States fans were just off the charts down at Kiowa Island. Do you think it will be sort of that home course environment? Is it going to get that rowdy in your mind?
Well, I tell you, when you combine alcohol and when you combine the, the absolute fan craze that goes on, this will be my 12th Ryder Cup that I'm going to be attending. I've seen the matches both on this side of the pond and on the other side. There have been some really nasty words said by fans to players during the course of matches, and they really need to keep an eye. As someone who lives in the New York metropolitan area, I would not want to see Bethpage get a black eye because of a situation that could happen at the matches. I mean, it should be competitive, and it should be where fans can get into it. But there is a fine line between getting into a match and then trying to exert an influence where you're seeking to embarrass somebody or seeking to create a scene so that the flow of the matches are interrupted. I would hope and I would think that the PGA of America and New York State, this is a state park, Bethpage, that they will have the full complement of security, and they will take a zero tolerance to anybody who attempts to do anything that could take away from the flow of the matches. That would be my hope. But as we saw at the Travelers, as we've seen in other situations, when you have that many people and you have alcohol, you have the possibility for people doing and saying things that are clearly out of bounds. But I fully anticipate that they would be on top of this, knowing full well what the circumstances are of having the event, at Bethpage and on Long Island.
All right, MJ, we'll certainly try and catch back up with you next week to look at it further, but let's at least get a sneak peek as to next weekend, the final major of the year in the golf calendar with the British Open coming up. And Rory McIlroy said today at the press conference for this weekend's Scottish Open that he has put his disastrous finish at the U.S. Open behind him. First off, do you buy that? And if that's indeed the case, is he the favorite next weekend in your mind?
Well, I'll just repeat what Bill Parcells used to say as a football paraphrase. You are what your record says you are. So until we see a score, until we see something, Rory McIlroy is fully capable of winning the Scottish Open. Make no mistake about it. He did that when he threw away the Masters in 2011. He set U.S. Open records with the next major when the U.S. Open came up in June at Congressional in 2011. He is fully capable of turning the script around. But the bottom line to this is, until he gets that monkey off his back with a major win, this is still going to be the storyline for a guy like him. And, there's other players that are fully capable, of winning, at Troon. So we'll see what happens at Renaissance this week when they play the Scottish Open. But I think it'll be interesting to see the flow and how McIlroy gets back into the competitive scene. He's fully capable of doing some really interesting things. And, clearly my hope is that he's in form so that we can see him play and hopefully play at his best what happens next week.
How difficult a golf course is Royal Troon compared to the other golf courses on that British Open rotation?
Well, Troon is basically a golf course that goes out in a series of holes in a straight line for the most part, and then it makes a U-turn. The first 6-7 holes, you really need to get the score going early. One of the famous holes in the world that people will see next week is the Postage Stamp. It's a par 3, plays about 130 yards. The green is about the size of someone's closet, and you better make sure you hit that green. And when you have wind conditions blowing, it'll make a premium on people who can control the flight of their golf ball. When you make the turn and you return, the prevailing wind is usually what you're facing for the balance of the round coming in. The last time the Open was there, it was a tremendous slugfest between Henrik Stenson and Phil Mickelson as they battled it out with each other, and eventually Henrik was the champion. So it'll be interesting to see. But the thing about Troon is, like any Open Championship course, the weather and the wind pattern, they dictate everything. But for Troon itself, you need to get out of the box early to score, because making birdies and trying to play catch-up late in the day is going to be a lot tougher to do. But with these guys and the way they're playing, I would not I fully expect them to be under par. Clearly, a guy like McIlroy, the names that we've seen before, the Schefflers of this world, Bryson DeChambeau's been playing great. I fully expect that the cream of the crop from this year is going to do it one more time, and we'll be interested to see when they shuffle the cards which one has the final winner and is called the champion golfer of the year.
His opinion column at Golf Today is, can Clark Kent become Superman at Bethpage, chatting about Keegan Bradley being named the United States Ryder Cup captain for next year. MJ Ward joins us here this evening. MJ, always fun catching up with you and tapping into that wealth of golf knowledge. Enjoy the weekend, and hopefully we'll be able to track you down next week and get a better preview of the British Open.
Guys, it's always a pleasure. And like I said, the Open is the final major of this year. And for golf fans, it'll be something to see next week at Troon. You guys have a good time. We'll talk to you from Scotland next week.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. We'll just have to figure out a way to make sure that we can keep MJ awake, guys. He'll be 5-6 hours in front of us. Remember last year, I think it was midnight, 12:30, that he had to call in. And we had a hard time tracking him down sometimes because he was, asleep. So hopefully that won't be the case this coming year, but always good to have MJ Ward on the program. It's amazing to me, Smitty. You listen to him run through all the stuff that we chat with him about when we have him on the program. All of that is just knowledge locked up in his brain and no notes. And it's remarkable that what he can recall in terms of his golf knowledge. He's as good a golf reporter as I know.
From afar, not being a golf expert, obviously, you would. I think, oh, well, how important would the captain of the Ryder Cup team be? As you mentioned, the players have to play, but it sounds to me, and I'm going to put words in MJ Ward's mouth, but you need the respect. The respect factor, because he said Keegan Bradley doesn't have the resume that most captains have, and you could tell MJ Ward was wincing a bit as he said that Phil Mickelson talked himself out of it by getting over there with Liv, and Tiger Woods just he thought that was going to be a better fit. So I find that very interesting. I don't think it has much to do with the strategy. It seems as much as bringing those guys together and being somebody that everyone can look up to and rally behind. It's so fascinating about team golf is probably, we have so much experience with other team sports, but team golf is probably just completely different than any other team sport that we experience. It's not like a basketball locker room. It's not going to be, because these guys compete individually all against each other all the time. And I mean all the time. From the time they're 12 years old, usually they know each other's names and see each other on scoreboards at junior tournaments and then up through the ranks. So to put these guys together and to pull it all together, you need a captain that commands respect. So now, if you're pulling for the United States, as I am, you hope Keegan Bradley is the man to do it.
All right, 888-898-2525 with MJ dropping off. That opens up the phone lines for you. And before we hit the top of the hour, let's take some phone calls here on this Wednesday. Plenty more news notes to come, plus former Gamecock kicker Josh Brown to give us his opinion on what we should expect to see from the SEC Media Days starting Monday, when Carolina will be one of the first teams up next week in Dallas. Speaking of the Gamecocks, we open it up on the phone lines with Gamecock Larry on this Wednesday evening. GCL, how are you this evening?
I'm doing just fine. How are you all? Well, I'll tell you what, this Clemson, Florida State, and ACC talk is beginning to get just about as bad as Democrats and Biden and the Democrats. Boy, y'all, I don't know. But let me tell you one thing. I've been listening to this. I don't know when they signed this deal about 25 years or something, staying there so long. I don't know what they're talking about, but I do know one thing, and I want to make sure I'll talk to Tiger Bryan. Tiger Bryan, do you remember when the Gamecocks went to the SEC? The Gamecocks and the Tigers got together. The Tigers told the Gamecocks, you go first, we'll follow. Well, you didn't do it, so we had to get Arkansas. And that's why you're in this mess you're in today. You could have been in the SEC with the Gamecocks. I could have been playing the Gamecocks every year like you always do, being happy. But now you got to be fighting. Lord have mercy. You should have went through with your promise. You go first, and the Tigers will go come second. You didn't do it. You backed out. We had to get Arkansas, and we doing pretty good. But that's about it. Oh yeah, Tiger Bryan. I'm going to Omaha before you do. I am going to Omaha. College World Series before you do. Go Gamecocks. Love all y'all. Talk to you later.
All right, Larry, we appreciate it. Larry's timeline a little off, though. When South Carolina and Clemson were talking about leaving the ACC, that's when they were both supposed to go. The Gamecocks went. Clemson did not. And so Clemson stayed in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It was not a situation where the Gamecocks and Tigers were thinking about both going to the SEC when USC was entered the league in 1991-92. Matter of fact, I think Florida State, if memory serves, was actually the SEC's first choice. And we've talked about this before. I think Bobby Bowden sort of nixed that. Did not want to leave the ACC, a conference he was dominating, to go to the SEC where he knew he would struggle. So the Gamecocks ended up going in along with Arkansas.
Yeah, that's right. And depending on who's book you read. And by the way, you have a lot of knowledge about what you just spoke about. For those that don't know, Chris was around a lot of the basketball people at the University of South Carolina, and got some, I'm sure, heard some pretty good stories. And I've heard some of those as well. And Phil Kornblut, who will be back with us next week, he has shared some of the stories that he's gotten over the years. And you are right. Frank McGuire, and we all knew about the acrimonious relationship between Frank McGuire and the Tobacco Road schools, which he felt like were swinging big hammers in the ACC, and there were a litany of reasons that he and others wanted to leave the ACC. And you're right, as I said, depending on whose book you read, the story goes South Carolina was going to exit the ACC, whatever that's 68, 69, and Clemson was going to follow, and Clemson stayed. And so now Gamecock Larry's right about one thing, though. Clemson has cast its lot with the ACC for these many years. When it was created, right? When Clemson left I believe they were in the Southern Conference prior to the 50s, and they've been with the ACC since the 50s, if I'm right about that.
All right, let's keep it on the phones before you hit the top of the hour. Let's head over to Georgia, just across the board to Augusta, and welcome in Steve to Sports Talk. Steve, good evening. How are you, sir?
Hey, how y'all doing?
We are well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Hey, I just wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on a topic from last night that everybody was talking about the 4 buys. And I know you guys are aware of this, but, there's actually a 5th buy if you factor in if Notre Dame is in that 12, they won't play on championship weekend. They'll get their bye just be a week early.
Good point. That is an excellent point that Notre Dame every year, if they're going to the playoff, every year while everybody else is playing on championship weekend, Notre Dame would be at home in the hot tub.
That's a really
right.
good point.
Excellent point.
That's right. When y'all were talking about that, it just kind of came to my thought process that they were just getting their bye a different week. So
yep, that's really good stuff, Steve. Thank you. Appreciate you calling. All right, 888-898-2525. We'll take the top of the hour update, come back and get into some news notes that we'll pass along. More of your phone calls, plus Josh Brown set to join us as well. If you missed the Clemson stories from the opening segment of the program, we'll recap some of that. Also, the Gamecocks have found out whom their opening game will be against in the upcoming Fort Myers tip-off. It's an interesting matchup. Delve into some of that. And do the SEC schools already know that they're going to play 9 conference games relatively soon? There's some interesting movement with non-conference scheduling that is broken today that may indicate that is indeed the case. We'll delve into all of that with you on a midweek Wednesday edition of Sports Talk here on the Sports Talk Media Network. Come on back.
Columbia, X4DF.
Grills, outdoor kitchens, fireplaces. Summer sizzle starts with Bart. This is 107 The Point.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Keith Peters reporting. New research suggests online political ads have become a lucrative platform for scammers trying to harvest your personal financial information. Correspondent Jennifer King reports.
Many political ads on social media are legitimate, but it turns out weak regulations and enforcement mean the ads have become a sprawling web information and ripoffs. Click here, the ads say. Take a survey, get a free gift, give us your credit card number for shipping, and get scammed. Professor Jennifer Stromer-Galley led research for the Election Graph Project at Syracuse University. Their dive into sites found ads that promised free political merchandise but didn't mention an $80 charge that would later appear. Right-leaning ads were more likely to target men. Progressive ads were more likely to target women. I'm Jennifer King.
Speaking at a NATO summit event in Washington today, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says Ukraine's Air Force is getting a boost from alliance members.
The transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands, and those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer.
NATO advances assurances that Ukraine will be allowed to join the Western military coalition, but only after its war with Russia ends. The House has passed a bill requiring proof of U.S. citizenship for voter registration. House Speaker Mike Johnson says those in America illegally cannot be allowed to sway U.S. elections.
Just a small percentage, a fraction of all those illegals that Joe Biden has brought in here to vote, if they do vote, it wouldn't just change one race. It might potentially change all of our races.
On Wall Street, the Dow up by 429 points, the Nasdaq rose 218, the S&P advanced 56. More at townhall.com.
Hi, this is Rhett Rasmussen of BestHotGrill.com. We make the amazing Solaire infrared gas grills that are built to last and will consistently deliver than restaurant grilled food. The Solaire infrared burner heats up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes, even in the dead of winter. The high heat locks in the juices and flavor and grills food faster. Learn more about these fantastic USA-made grills at BestHotGrill.com. Solaire, hot, fast grills at BestHotGrill.com.
Do you just grin and bear it or bite the bullet when it comes to everyday pain? Don't. Try Relief Factor, a drug-free daily supplement that helps your body fight pain naturally. Relief Factor doesn't just mask pain, it helps reduce or even eliminate it. It's 100% free. It's developed by doctors. In 3 weeks or less, you'll know whether it works for you like it works for me. Try Relief Factor for yourself. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF and save on your first order. That's 1-800-4-RELIEF.
Statisticians and demographers are sounding the alarm about threats to official data gathering in the U.S.
They warn that funding for the federal statistical agencies is inadequate, and measures in a House appropriations bill could undermine what Americans know about themselves. A report from the American Statistical Association also warns the agencies lack protections against political interference. Advocates are concerned about a bill on Capitol Hill which they say would limit how many times a respondent can be contacted by federal agencies and would therefore miss many more people.
Correspondent Jeremy House reporting. A pair of government regulators slapped Citigroup with a $135.6 million fine on Wednesday, saying the bank has made insufficient progress in resolving long-standing internal control and risk issues. News and analysis at townhall.com. I'm Keith Peters.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
Here's tonight's forecast. We'll have a low this evening of 75. Tomorrow, look for a bit less humidity. Still hot, the high is 95, but a lower heat index. It'll be a mix of sun and clouds, and again, a 20% chance we get showers in the afternoon. So Friday, that looks like our best chance for showers, a 50% opportunity of rain, and a cold front. High of only 88. I'm Cal Moss with your On Point local weather.
WQXL Columbia, W264DF.
Grills, outdoor kitchens, fireplaces. Summer sizzle starts with Bart. This is 107 The Point. Please press button now. I said to, genius.
Welcome back to Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network. You can reach the guys with the South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number. 888-898-2525. That's 888-898-2525. Now back to Phil and Chris with the second hour of Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network.
All right, hour number 2 here on Sports Talk on a Wednesday evening. Chris Bergen along with Matt Smith and Josh Cohen up until 8 o'clock. Phil Kornblut on vacation until Monday when he'll join us from Dallas, Texas. We'll begin our coverage of SEC Media Days on Monday. Then the following week, of course, we will have ACC kickoff covered. And as I mentioned in the first hour, Smitty, that's probably going to be, I think, the most attended ACC kickoff in terms of the media, certainly the most interest surrounding that in a long, long time with everything going on with the Tigers and Florida State. We will also have coverage of Sunbelt Conference Media Day. Coastal Carolina will be down in New Orleans a week from Monday. We'll be headed down there, and then Tuesday is when the East Division teams will go through in New Orleans with the West Division teams that following Wednesday. 888-898-2525 if you'd like to join us here this evening. Again, 888-898-2525. We opened up the program, and in case you weren't with us at the outset of the show, probably worth repeating, a couple of stories regarding Clemson athletics, starting with John Blau, the Post and Courier, reporting that, as expected, Judge Louis A. Bledsoe in Mecklenburg County has not granted Clemson's motions to stay the ACC case against the university in full. He did dismiss several parts of the ACC's complaint. You can read that in John's column at the Post and Courier because it's got so much legalese. I can't explain it even if I read it to you. It doesn't make any sense. But the more interesting thing that we have seen is a tweet late yesterday evening from Greg Swaim's show that he is reporting, this is breaking news according to him, that as we've said for a year, Florida State and Clemson will not get a Big Ten offer due to neither being AAU accredited, but from Vegas, where the Big 12 is hosting its media days. The talk is the SEC has now turned the pair down as well. With new sponsorship, the Big 12 probably won't pay quite what the other two do, but with those two, they'll pay double what the Atlantic Coast Conference does. And Greg adds, it won't end there. Talk is the Big 12 will take 6 from the Atlantic Coast Conference. And Smitty, as you and I were perusing social media here in the last little bit during the top of the hour, Greg Swaim evidently is not the only one that is plugged into the fact that maybe Clemson and Florida State, their destiny is not the Big Ten or the SEC.
Right. I know that I saw Dan Wetzel as well had a similar take in a story, and Brett McMurphy from about a month ago went on as a guest on a podcast and said just as much. So these are national writers with well-placed sources, and we got a message. Ray sent us a message, and sometimes we want to read these to make sure there's no confusion. Ray said Florida State and Clemson will not be left out of a big conference. So, by the way, that's an argument right there that the Big 12 is not a big conference, which is an argument you can make because, I don't know, Cincinnati and Houston are not exactly Ohio State, Michigan. Look what Clemson brings to the table. All men's sports as well as a few women's sports, they're close to elite. Keep thinking they don't bring eyes to the TV. Definitely a bigger brand than USC, meaning South Carolina. And I don't think, and this is why I think we perhaps should have said this is not you and I necessarily saying that Clemson is not going to land in the SEC. Look, these national writers could be wrong. Plus, the landscape is always changing. It could shift under their feet and things could switch. But the point being, it's not that Clemson is not a bigger brand than South Carolina and has had more national success in football.
That's inarguable.
That's inarguable. That's right. That's inarguable. It's where the SEC stands and cutting the pie up right now 16 ways. The way they have looked westward for expansion into those television markets. So I think it's important that it's not just about, this is not a South Carolina Clemson thing. It's very difficult inside our state sometimes to necessarily parse through those things. It's not South Carolina Clemson. It is about where the SEC stands and where they might look to expand, if at all. And in my opinion, this might have been the goal all along. They went and got Arkansas, then they got South Carolina, and then they were going after those television markets like Missouri and Oklahoma and Texas, and they've landed Texas A&M and Texas. So I think they feel content, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's where this is going, is that they're content. Now, will the Big Ten relent? Because that AAU accreditation, I think Nebraska's had some issues with that. So that could be something. Maybe Clemson and Florida State could force their way into the Big Ten. Maybe that's a landing spot eventually down the road. But this is not us saying this. This is us questioning, me especially. I said all along, I'm not so sure Clemson and Florida State are just going to get an SEC invite if they fight their way. They win this bar fight with the ACC. I don't think it's a given the SEC is going to come after them. That's all. And some of these national writers are backing that up. It is not a Clemson versus South Carolina thing.
No, I don't care, quite frankly, where Clemson ends up. I don't care if South Carolina stays in the SEC because I believe, first off, the Gamecocks aren't leaving the SEC. No one leaves the SEC. Everybody wants in. But the problem, in my opinion, in 10 years, none of this is going to matter. It's all going to be a moot point because I think we're going to get to a situation where, let's assume for a second, the Big 12 goes to 20 some odd teams. That's not sustainable as a conference. What they'll ultimately do is the Power Fives, Power Four, Power Three, whatever it is just going to be one big conglomeration like the NFL underneath one umbrella, and conference affiliation won't matter. Maybe it does for some of the smaller, lesser sports, maybe even up to the level of basketball and baseball. But from football's perspective, it won't matter where you are because I don't think conference borders are going to keep everybody in place. Even if Clemson gets out of the ACC and goes to the Big 10, the the Big 12 or the SEC, I don't know that that fixes the problem because I don't believe those conferences as we now know them are going to govern and exist the way they currently do 10 years down the road. I just don't see college athletics stopping at a situation where we don't have just these mega situations where the conferences have gotten way too big. They're bloated. So let's just do this. Everybody plays under the umbrella of college football, and we'll divide you up into regions. And it doesn't matter who you are, but your region is going to be the Southeast. All right, that's every team in FBS football in the Southeast. The Midwest will have every team in the Midwest. You can geographically draw out the borders and work it that way because, Smitty, I don't think 10, 15 years from now we will have an SEC like we know it today. I don't think we'll have a Big 12 as we certainly won't have it as we know it today because it looks like that's going to continue to expand. I just don't understand. I don't believe the argument to whatever league you're getting into is going to be all that important here in the next decade.
Well, you may be right, and I really hope you're wrong because – but what I like is the identity of some of these conferences. But, look, we have this bloated Big 12 already, and Baylor and BYU are in the same conference as Houston and UCF. So we may have left identity. And of course, SMU is in the ACC. So we may have left identity far behind. I'm just hoping – I guess I'm hoping against hope to put some of this genie back in the bottle, and I think I'm standing on the train tracks.
Yeah, look out because the locomotive is coming at you hard because tradition in college athletics has gone out the window, my friend. It's a shame, but it has gone out the window. And I think a lot of what we currently see and enjoy is not going to be around in another decade. All right, we'll get into a few more news notes. Also, Josh Brown, former Gamecock place kicker, will join us right after 7:30. We're going to talk with him about some SEC Media Day stuff, what his take is for the upcoming season for USC. We'll do that just after 7:30. But let's head back to the phones and visit with you on the South Carolina Education Lottery lucky number at 888-898-2525. We go up to Greenville and say hello to Rocky. He's up next here on Sports Talk. Good evening, Rocky. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you all are. Good evening. Yes.
Good evening, sir.
It's a little warm around everywhere. So hope you guys are staying cool.
Misery loves company, my friend. Misery loves company.
Upstate, it's hot up here too, boss. All right. It's hot everywhere. I'm calling about, Florida State and Clemson. You guys were talking earlier, and I was out of pocket, but it just reminds me, let's just say it's a player of, you can pick a sport, it doesn't matter, and they're in the midst, they sign a longer-term contract, and all of a sudden in that contract, they're like, well, wait a minute, these guys that are similar to me, they're getting paid more money, I want to renegotiate. And those contracts are ironclad, and it's only the organization, okay, if they're willing to do it. But you've seen a lot of times, no, you sign that contract, it stands pat. And you got Clemson and Florida State, and they can get out. Obviously, everybody can get out of a contract, but guys, it's gonna cost them a lot of money. Now, whether you go to the Big Ten or whether you go to the SEC, and I don't think Clemson's not going to the SEC. Florida State's not going to the SEC. If the SEC takes anybody, it's going to be a North Carolina school. All right. That's just, I think everybody's talked to that, and we're kind of tired about that, but it's going to cost them a lot of money. What do you guys think?
Well, and that's always been my contention about the entire lawsuit. I mean, Clemson, Florida State, NC State, Virginia, all these schools in the ACC clamored for the grant of rights deal a long time ago. They knew what they were getting into. Now, maybe they didn't read the fine print, which is what the current attorneys are trying to uncover to see if there's a loophole. That's on the schools. That's not on the Atlantic Coast Conference. They should have known what was in that contract or don't sign it. But they all wanted to do this, and I'm like you, Rocky. That's one thing that has always bothered me about this. They signed that deal. They wanted to be grouped together until, 2036. And now just because you're not getting the same payday that you see around the country, you should have thought about that 10, 15 years ago. You've made your bed. You're supposed to live in it, and instead they're trying to figure out a way to get upset and get out of it. And I think they will. I think they ultimately will. Now, the bigger question is, if they do get out, where are they going to land?
I can use this, and I'll hang up, and I'll relate this to my mother and my stepfather. My parents were divorced very early in my life, and my mother remarried when I was 11 years old. I'm 62 now, but she married her, and my dad remarried. But my mother married a man 17 years her elder, and I love him, and I miss him every day. I mean, he raised me, but eventually it was going to, and I told her later on when she got, I said, Mom, you married him and he's 17 years older than you, so when you're 63 and he's 80, okay, you're gonna be, don't moan and groan or anything because he can't. And I used to tell her that, and it is what it was, but he was a wonderful man, and he lived to be 84 years old. And God rest them both. My mother as well died earlier, at an earlier age. But that's the way I look at it. You sign up for what you sign up for, and you got to understand the consequences down the road, if that makes sense, I guess. That's,
Absolutely does. That's sort of my thinking too. Rocky, we appreciate it. 888-898-2525 if you'd like to be on the show. We've got plenty more news nuggets we want to get to before the night is done. But Josh, let's go ahead and take the break, and then we'll come back and get into recruiting. Haven't had a chance to see how much recruiting is in here. I'm afraid to open it up from Phil, because Phil's had all day by himself. So there may be a ton of recruiting. So let's make sure we get plenty of time for recruiting. Brought to you by our good friends at Seawells and the Daily Luncheon Buffet. We'll do that next. You stick around. You want to find out what the hottest recruiting news is? We've got it for you next here on Sports Talk.
Relax this summer with a promotional rate on select travel purchases with your Founders Federal Credit Union credit card. Now through August 31st, get 6.99% APR for on qualifying purchases, including airfare, hotels, restaurants, and cruise lines. Don't let interest rates slow you down this summer. Visit foundersfcu.com/travel to learn more. Not a Founders member yet? Founders has the financial tools you need and the personalized service you deserve. Stop by an office or visit foundersfcu.com to learn more about Founders and see if you qualify for membership. On March 1st, 2025, the promotional APR will revert to the effective APR as previously disclosed. Call 800-845-1644 for details about credit costs and terms. Membership qualification required.
Call Lawyer Lisa. Experience the difference with Lawyer Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hosteller-Brown. Did you know it's possible to avoid probate court after you die, regardless of what you own? Why put your loved ones through a long, stressful public process when there are better options for your family? Visit lawyerlisa.com to see how we can help.
Call Lawyer Lisa. Experience the difference with Lawyer Lisa.
7511 St. Andrews Road, Irmo, South Carolina.
You're listening to Sports Talk on the Sports Talk Media Network. We're back in a moment. There's a lot of things we take for granted in our lives. Your home's AC will run cool. Your drive-through coffee will be hot. And the car will start when it's time to take your kids to school. It's when things don't go as planned that you start thinking about who to call and where to turn. The good thing is, you can prepare for life's most difficult days by calling the Larry Lucas Agency today. Larry is a State Farm agent that has been taking care of people across South Carolina for more than 2 decades. You probably have insurance, but switching is easy, and bundling can save you hundreds or more. Most importantly, the Larry Lucas Agency can help you choose the protection you want at the price you want. all backed by South Carolina's #1 home and auto insurance company. Visit LarryLucasAgency.com today or give Larry a call at 803-799-1998. Like a good neighbor, Larry Lucas State Farm is there.
Put in the work for your education. The extra early, extra late, extra work. That's because you understand education opens doors to better pay, better opportunities, and a better you. Being educated about playing the lottery is no different. It helps you be a better player, one who knows when to play and when to take a rain check. The lottery's a game, so let's keep it fun. Learn more at sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
The Sports Talk Recruiting Report is sponsored by Seawell's Catering.
Big buffet, big recruiting report by our good friends at Seawell's in Columbia, the best place and the hottest place to go for the daily luncheon buffet, which will feature tomorrow, Josh Cohen.
Southern fried chicken, hamburger, steak and onions, and teriyaki glazed salmon. Sounds pretty good to me.
Absolutely does. And if you're looking for the best in the catering business, then you need to get in touch with Seawell's at SeawellsCateringSC.com. Plus, where did it go? Here we go. Seawell's is also the place for you USC fans. If you're starting to be interested in looking for a place to park for upcoming football games, you can do so at Seawell's. Get in touch with him there. And the upcoming soccer match that will take place in early August, the Premier League soccer match that Williams-Brice Stadium will be hosting, that is another place you can park at Seawell's. So just log on to SeawellsCateringSC.com for menu options or give them a call at 803-771-7385 for the deets, as kids say, the details on parking. All right, in recruiting, USC target wide receiver Lex Cyrus of Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, will announce his commitment decision tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. He's picking between the Gamecocks and Penn State. USC does not have, at least yet, a running back committed for the 2025 class. They have, though, offered nearly a dozen and went hardest after Jeffrey Overton, who eventually committed to Virginia Tech. Now running backs coach Marquell Blackwell is looking hard again at Jaden Jackson of Franklin, Texas, a player he first recruited when he was at Texas A&M. We talk often. It's an every week thing, Jackson said. He's telling me to be patient and stick with the game, have my mind ready by maybe September or August. Maybe it should be the other way around, August or September. Jackson made his first visit to USC June the 14th. He is returning for camp on July the 26th. He also has an official visit set for the weekend of October the 4th when the Ole Miss Rebels will be in Columbia. USC commitment defensive tackle Caleb Williams of Chesterfield, Virginia, has been committed since April. He made official visits to USC, Minnesota, and Virginia Tech, and has always held firm to his pledge, but not long after his close friend, quarterback Shamari Earls, announced a decommitment from the Gamecocks and a commitment to Georgia on Sunday. Williams was offered by the Bulldogs. He was interviewed by the Georgia On 3 site and said the Bulldogs are trying to get him in for a visit. However, Williams said in a story he remains firmly committed to the Gamecocks, and he later said in an Instagram post, quote, "Not flipping, staying true, word is bond," end quote. Offensive center Isaac Souls of Louisville said he's at a 2 on a 10 scale towards making the decision between USC, NC State, Kentucky, and Miami. Smitty, I don't know much about recruiting, but my guess is 2 out of 10. He's not really ready yet. Just going to go out on a limb there.
Glad we had it in there tonight.
Even though he makes his announcement next week, July the 18th. He talked to Shane Beamer earlier in the week and hears from him and State's Dave Doran, the most among head coaches. However, all schools are in regular contact and showing him love, I'm sure. USC on Wednesday offered 2026 running back Javian Osborne of Forney, Texas. Last season, he rushed 290 times for over 2,200 yards with 41 touchdowns. On Tuesday, USC offered 2026 defensive end Keenan Britt of Oxford, Alabama. He's already sent a commitment announcement for July the 29th. Other offers include Oregon, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia Tech, Florida, Ole Miss, Arkansas, UCF, and Louisville. Last season, Britt had 107 tackles with 8 sacks and 20 for loss. USC on Tuesday as well offered 2026 linebacker Jarmichael Garrett of Gulf Shores, Alabama. He also has offers from Arkansas, Oregon, Southern Cal, Miami, Mississippi State, and also NC State. USC target 2026 defensive back Jontavius Wyman of Jonesboro, Georgia, has moved his commitment date back to July the 27th. He's believed, though, to be a lean to, say it with me now. Everybody know where he's leaning? Smitty? If he's a USC target, where do you think he's probably leaning?
Is he leaning toward the Gamecocks?
He's actually a strong lean, evidently, to Georgia.
I see.
See, I think Kirby Smart's pretty smart. He's clever with this. He waits to see who South Carolina's recruiting, and then he makes a phone call, and he usually gets them 9 times out of 10. You can't argue with the recruiting machine that the Bulldogs have pieced together, for sure.
All right, so this is like the old move of the Yankees just wait for the Royals to have a good player, and then he becomes a free agent, and you just go get him.
That's exactly right. You know, whoever is not performing all that well, some of the lower level teams, you just go buy them. And I don't know that that's the case here, but it just seems like anybody that South Carolina really wants, Georgia's able to get, partly because they're Georgia. All right, Riverside wide receiver Michael Skinner was offered by Kentucky. He's been committed to Cincinnati. Meantime, wide receiver Braylon Stewart of Raleigh committed to Furman. Last season, 71 receptions for almost 1,200 yards and 16 touchdowns. How about this? He also had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. Dangerous weapon that Furman will be getting into the fold. Wide receiver Evan James of Leesburg, Florida is committed to Furman as well. Former USC baseball commitment wide receiver Micah Matthews will make his football commitment sometime tonight. His final 4 are North Carolina, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Utah. Left-handed pitcher Dan Margolis of Chester, Connecticut, has committed to Clemson. Meantime, West Ashley catcher Noah Franklin has committed to USC. Virginia transfer right-handed pitcher Cullen McKay has committed to Coastal Carolina, whereas former Coastal Carolina left-handed pitcher Liam Doyle is transferring from Ole Miss to Tennessee. Greenwood native right-handed pitcher Garrett Hodges is transferring from Gardner-Webb to Charlotte. And this is somewhat of a surprise considering who they are. The USC women's basketball team did not make the cut to a Final 6 with 6'1" guard Jazzy Davidson of Portland. They were in her Final 8, making the cut, though, Duke, Texas, TCU, UCLA, Southern Cal, and Connecticut. And that is recruiting tonight, presented by our good friends at Seawells. Don't forget about the daily luncheon buffet. And again, the items up on the docket tomorrow, Josh.
Oh, man, I'm not ready. I already closed the tab. I believe. Okay.
I don't remember?
Southern fried chicken. Fried chicken. Teriyaki glazed salmon. And give me a second. Give me a second here. Wow. You really put me on the spot here, Chris. Oh, hamburger, steak, and onions. Southern fried chicken, hamburger, steak, and onions, and teriyaki glazed salmon. Sounds pretty good to me.
Done, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Well done,
really
sir.
Put me on the spot.
Check that out at Seawells. And don't forget, Gamecock fans, if you're looking for parking, get in touch with Seawells as well. Right across the street from the Rocket over in Columbia, and Seawells Catering SC.com. All right, speaking of the Gamecocks, quick other news notes from today. South Carolina men's basketball will face Xavier in its opening game of the 2024 Fort Myers tip-off on November the 25th. The Gamecocks and Musketeers will tip off at 8:30. The other side of the Beach Division bracket features Michigan and Virginia Tech, who will play prior at 6 p.m. The championship game will tip off at 8:30 on Wednesday, November the 27th, with the third-place game taking place at 6 p.m. And, Smitty, you know what this is? It's to find out if Ray Tanner made the right decision, right? Because Xavier is coached by, of course, Sean Miller, the former Arizona coach, who was hot and heavy on evidently the top of the list in terms of Gamecock coaching searches after Frank Martin was dismissed by Ray Tanner. Sean Miller went back to Xavier. Gamecocks ended up with Lamont Paris, which I think has been a tremendous hire for them. But now he'll get a chance to prove it by going up against Sean Miller and the Musketeers.
On Point Weather is made possible by our friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union on 107 The Point.
Here's tonight's forecast. We'll have a low this evening of 75 for a bit. Humidity still hot, the high is 95, but a lower heat index. It'll be a mix of southern clouds and again a 20% chance we get showers in the afternoon. So Friday, that looks like our best chance for showers, a 50% opportunity of rain and a cold front, high of only 88. I'm Cal Moss with your On Point local weather.
Breathe fresh life into your home with Lake Murray Soft Wash. Our team specializes in power washing, soft washing, and restoration. From roof cleaning to wood and concrete washdowns, we've got you covered. For top-notch, affordable services that you can trust, call now. 528-1990. Log on to LakeMurraySoftWash.com to make an appointment. We're not just professionals, we're your neighbors. Whether residential or commercial, Lake Murray Soft Wash sets the standard in cleaning. Embrace the sparkling difference today.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters reporting Houston's primary utility company has come under mounting pressure over its response to Hurricane Beryl. Nearly 1.3 million homes and businesses in the area remained without power Wednesday, and residents continued to search for places to cool, fuel up, and find food. A CenterPoint Energy official defended the company's response during a meeting with the Houston City Council. A prolonged heat wave has baked Las Vegas in its record fifth consecutive day of temperatures sizzling at 115 degrees or greater. The National Weather Service says the temperature climbed to 115 Wednesday afternoon at Harry Reid International Airport. That broke the previous mark of 4 consecutive days. On Wall Street, the Dow up by 429 points. The Nasdaq rose 218. Details at srnnews.com.
Here's a shocker. It gets hot in South Carolina. Seems kind of crazy that if you got a home or you got a business, you're sick of the power companies controlling you, demanding rate increases every 6 months, sick of your power bill going up. You can't even pick your power company, but you can choose Broker Solar to give you some control over that bill. Solar panels are not free like some of these stupid yard signs say. These door knockers often, well, they're scam artists. Not Broker Solar. They don't go knocking on the doors. I told Ken I want some incentive for our Point family listeners. So purchase a system from Broker Solar. Your solar panel is free. Look, I'm not into scare tactics, but this is an election year, and the way things are going, well, maybe it's time to stop relying on the government or these power companies. Broker Solar offers you control. Solar can save you money. These solar batteries are amazing. What a huge difference they can make. Do your homework. Online, it's brokersolar.com, or just call Ken. I trust him. I really do. You can also. 807-7417. That's 807-7417.
This is Fran Halloran. Tune into my show, The Intentional Living Power Hour, on Thursday mornings from 9 to 10 for simple and practical financial coaching on The Point. 0.7 FM, 1470 AM, Columbia's local talk radio experience.
Now you see them. That's right. Those weeds in your grass. And that's because you didn't have Midland's Landscape and Lawns treat your lawn. Hey, this is Paul Romanstein, proud owner of Midland's Landscape and Lawns. Let us take care of those weeds in the grass. Let us get that grass healthy and ready for this season. You know you want a green plush lawn? Let the pros take care of it. Somebody who's local, somebody dependable, and somebody that cares. That's Midland's Landscape and Lawns. You can find us at hateweeds.com. Hates.com.
Dave Ramsey here. Do you want your money to work for you rather than you working for your money? Go see my friends at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. They're not a mega bank and have been serving the Midlands since 1936, offering good old-fashioned customer service and free services. They'll look out for your financial well-being. With 14 locations, check them out today at palmettocitizens.org. Federally insured by the NCUA.
Want to hear my success story? I'm Fran Halloran, the Money Coach. I'm celebrating a decade of partnering with The Point. It's one of the best decisions I ever made. I've used The Point to significantly grow my small business. It started with a meeting with Kevin Cohen. Do you own a small business? Are you on a limited budget? No problem. Reach out to Kev at 563-8558. Get a customized plan and start your journey to business growth with The Point today. Success is one call away. Take the leap.
Hello, this is Stacy Huff, host of Huff Nation Sports Zone, each and every Saturday, 10 to 11 a.m. right here on 100.7 FM and also 1470 a.m. It'll be a fun trip around the world of sports. Huff Nation Sports Zone, check it out.
And welcome back into Sports Talk. Last half hour on this Wednesday night. It's been a a good show. We've taken some good calls tonight and had some really good topics, including Clemson and Florida State trying to win their bar fight against the ACC. This with ACC Media Days, or ACC Kickoff, just a couple of weeks away. I'll be there in person to be a part of some of those questioning sessions. And, of course, Phil Kornblut will be at SEC Media Days in Dallas, Texas. And we will take just a second here to have our special guest on, Josh Brown, who works with Lawyer Lisa, which you have heard those spots on our stations for a while here on Sports Talk. And Josh is the CEO of Lawyer Lisa and her husband, proud husband. And more importantly, of course, he hit a 49-yard field goal against Tennessee in 2005. So South Carolina was able to beat the Vols and Phil Fulmer for the first time on Rocky Top. Josh, welcome to Sports Talk. I don't know if Phil Kornblut covered your recruiting, but I'm going to guess that he did.
Yes, he did, and thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, before we get into what you do with Lawyer Lisa, I know you tell the story all the time, and I know you probably never have to buy your own drink in Columbia anywhere, and you made a lot of field goals in your time as the starting kicker at South Carolina. But for those that remember, it was a 16-15 win in 2005 in Tennessee. 49 yards is a long, long way, Josh. I actually just watched the video of that. So can you tell the story for us? Like I said, I'm sure you tell it to your buddies all the time, or you get asked all the time. Can you tell it one more time for us?
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's such a great memory. I don't mind telling it again. Coach Spurrier throughout the year would always say, hey, be ready, it might come down to a field goal. Well, lo and behold, the Tennessee game, I saw kind of where we were in field position and what the score was. And then it was like third down, and Coach was kind of debating it, and I was halfway out on the field. And he just kind of motioned me on to go out there and kick. So, as you saw the video and everybody else remembers, and always never ceases to tell me where they were and what they were doing when it happened, of course, because it's such a big event, first win there. But anyways, after the game, Coach Spurrier told the media, and still tells the story to this day, and I think he wrote in his book that, I didn't know what I wanted to do there, but Josh was already halfway out on the field. So he said to himself, well, I guess he really wants to kick it. Go ahead. He said it made me look like Coach of the Year.
Oh, that's great. He really, because you had such confidence that I'll let him kick it. So that lets us inside the mind of a national championship winning coach, an offensive innovator. The kicker's just halfway out there, so we'll just let him go for it. What was Steve Spurrier like as a head coach? And that was such a fascinating. Yeah, that was Blake Mitchell, and of course Sidney Rice was on your team. What was it like being in that locker room and having the famous and legendary Steve Spurrier as your coach?
Oh, it was awesome. So many great memories to look back on. And actually that Tennessee game was a good one, because before the game, Coach said, hey, if we pull this win off, we're all going to sing Rocky Top in the locker room. So after the game, when he handed the game balls out, I was the last one to get one. And then he's like, all right, let's call it up. And I said, oh, Coach, remember you said we could sing Rocky Top. So then we all, as a team, got to sing Rocky Top in the visitor locker room as the last moment of the first win there. So it was quite a moment and quite an event that you can always look back on and just have a great feeling about,
Josh Brown joining us. As I said, he's moved on. He's done a lot of things in his career. We'll get to that in just a moment. Of course, his role at Lawyer Lisa. We'll do that in just a moment. Josh, who was your best friend on the team? I'm always curious. Who were you palling around with back then?
Oh, well, I mean, I was friends with everybody, but of course my clique there was the special teams guys. So, Ryan Suckup was a freshman. That was my senior year. So Ryan Suckup was there. Everybody knows who that is, of course. Ike Crowfoot, long snapper. Scott Morgan, long snapper. Everybody. Blake Mitchell. I mean, the list goes on and on. We all were a close group because of what we went through when Coach Holtz left and bringing Coach Spurrier in. We all wanted to have that sense of success because of how frustrated we were with the previous seasons, you know.
Well, you certainly had some great success in your time there. What was it like? You said you were friends with Blake Mitchell. I wonder, did he know whether he was going to be playing quarterback from week to week in the Spurrier area?
Oh no. And here's the thing. Coach Spurrier will openly admit it, that he'll never yell at a punter or kicker, you know. I guess he feels like their job is important enough to where him yelling at him ain't going to help anything. It's probably going to do more hurting. And that is the absolute complete opposite of how the quarterbacks get treated, let me tell you. So he's pretty rough on them and demands perfection. I think it just comes from him being, you know, Heisman winning quarterback. And, you know, he just wants that greatness to come out of the guys that he coaches like he played.
Well, Josh, let's talk about what you do now. Obviously, Lawyer Lisa has been a great supporter of Sports Talk, and so we want to, you know, illuminate and kind of make sure we know everything that you offer there at Lawyer Lisa. Tell us about your role there and what your wife, Lawyer Lisa Hustetler Brown, what she specializes in with that firm, and where can they get to an office here in the state?
Yeah, of course. Lisa's created a great practice at Lawyer Lisa. Really, the main focus right now I'd like to highlight on is the life care planning that she provides to all the elderly navigating aging issues. And she has a great staff that will help all the people that are aging navigate benefits, elder care, you know, doctor's visits, cognitive visits, and just she has somebody on her staff that will help in every aspect of what these people are going to be going through. So what's great about it is her and her team will stay on board with these clients as they navigate this stuff, because it is a subscription service. So it's not like your typical estate planning attorney that you go in and you get documents done. This is something that they will help them with day by day, month by month, year by year, and what they have to deal with.
Josh Brown with us here tonight. Sorry, Josh, I thought Smitty had one other thing he wanted to ask you, but I wanted to go back to your career because I hate to date you, but you've been out of college now for just about 2 decades, and I'm just curious, as a former player, now that you look back on the landscape of college athletics, where it is in 2024 versus where it was back in 2005. First off, could you have ever guessed it would have advanced as far as it has with regards to the transfer portal, and also obviously with name, image, and likeness availabilities that you didn't have opportunities for? And where does this go in your mind, and how much further down the road can we go with the current setup?
Man, it has changed so much. It's hard to keep up with now. You know, I'm looking back, I'm a little frustrated that stuff wasn't around when I was there. I mean, that sounds like a great opportunity for some guys, and but it's changed good and bad. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. I don't like the transfer portal as much. I think you lose a lot of loyalty with guys if they can just jump out and go wherever they want and play the next year. It used to be you had to sit out a year if you transferred. And the name, image, and likeness is it's crazy. I mean, it's just somewhat out of control just because people start chasing money, and that's not what it boils down to. You should be playing the game at the college level for the love of the game, you know? So it's changed so much.
Let's look ahead to next week. It'll be SEC Media Days. I know you remember those days back when you were a player. How much fun from a player's perspective are those type of events where you get to go and meet all the different media members? And also, what do you anticipate the Gamecock contingent will be able to say about the upcoming season regarding their team? And what would you like to hear as a former player? What would you like to hear from Shane Beamer on Monday when he takes the podium about this year's squad?
Oh, those things are very nice to be able to be at and talk, optimistically about this year, which I'm sure that will be the case. And they have a tough schedule, and hopefully everybody can stay healthy and we can, make some good commotion in the SEC this year. It's a tough schedule, and in order to do that, you got to have everybody come together and work as a team. And I believe in Coach Beamer. He's done a great job so far, and I think the program's heading in the right direction for sure.
Josh, tough one to finish on, kind of a two-part question, because it's not every day we get to talk to someone that was in these big, tense moments. Do you recall the loudest you heard Williams-Brice Stadium? We talked about a big road win you had on the road at Tennessee on Rocky Top. Do you recall any moments at Williams-Brice Stadium that you just can't ever forget? And maybe was there a road stadium that was the toughest to kick in, that was the toughest road environment you remember?
Well, there was a lot of moments that it was really loud in Williams-Brice. But the one that stands out to me was when we beat Florida at home my senior year when Coach Spurrier was there, and the crowd just wouldn't leave. And we went in the tunnel, and then all of a sudden everybody turned around and ran back out and ran around the field one more time. I mean, it was just one of those electric type day, night, whatever, and it just nobody wanted it to end. So that was a really fun night. As far as an away game goes, I mean, oh gosh, I mean, Knoxville is loud just because they cram so many people in there, and Georgia's loud. Florida was very tense as well. At Florida, the stands are literally right behind the bleachers on the sideline for the game, so you feel like the fans are literally right on your back yelling at you, So that's a tough environment there. But definitely the home game against Florida when we beat them my senior year with Coach Spurrier was a night to remember for sure.
Well, Josh, we really appreciate your insight tonight. And, of course, we appreciate your support and everything you're doing at Lawyer Lisa. We'll continue to send everybody to lawyerlisa.com, and we'll stay in touch, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
That was really cool, Smitty. I'm glad you got Josh Brown on the program. Always nice to have perspective from somebody who's, as you pointed out, been in the arena, and especially pressure kickers like he was with the win at Tennessee, and having gone through all that experience, and for him to look back now, I was stunned. Because I can remember when he played. Hard to believe it's been 20 years since he put on a Gamecock uniform.
Absolutely, and some of the younger South Carolina fans who were brought up on some of the successes that Steve Spurrier had, and then obviously, Will Muschamp pulled a couple of major upsets, and Shane Beamer's had big upsets and wins over highly ranked Tennessee and Clemson as well. But to go back, and you'll remember this, Chris, like regional writers, they probably all picked Tennessee to win that game. It was just unheard of for South Carolina to go on the road, even with Steve Spurrier, because it was his first year there, to go on the road to Rocky Top and go beat Philip Fulmer and company. That just was not dreamt of at that time. Now we all know these upsets happen, and South Carolina has pulled enough of them and gone toe-to-toe with some of these giants and beaten some highly ranked teams. But back then, it didn't happen very often. And so in 2005, whoever would have been writing at the Knoxville News-Sentinel would have just been floored that Josh Brown hit that 49-yard field goal in the final minutes, and South Carolina was able to hold on and beat Tennessee on Rocky Top. That was a very, very big moment in the history of South Carolina, and we just were able to hear from someone who was not just right there in it, but played a key role, if not the key role.
Wonder how many of the players actually knew the words to Rocky Top.
I know. I grew up,
and not just the chorus. I'm assuming they just sang the chorus, but I mean, how many of them would have actually known the words to the chorus?
I don't know. I always knew it from the time I was a kid.
Well, if you ever go watch Tennessee play, even if you didn't know it when the game started, you'd know it by the time the game was over.
They wear it out, baby.
That's certainly too. All right, 888-898-2525. If you'd like to join us here in the last 10 minutes or so of the program. We touched on this a little bit earlier. I wanted to follow up on this. It's perfect coming out of Josh Brown joining us with SEC Media Days set to unfold starting Monday. Of course, the ACC Media Days are going to be totally focused, I think, on Clemson and Florida State, their lawsuits. Are they going to another league? The whole 9 yards. I mean, that's going to be a circus in Charlotte. I think, though, this is going to be a highly interesting topic to follow next week, Smitty, because there have been 3 different reports out today about current Southeastern Conference member schools that are canceling non-conference football series with big-time schools. For instance, Mark Weiser, who covers Georgia, says, bye-bye Georgia football series with UCLA. Hello to Marshall, the Sun Belt Conference team that will open next season against the Bulldogs. Meantime, Brett McMurphy is saying that Florida and California have canceled their 2-game series scheduled in 2026 and 2027. Nathan King, whom I'm assuming covers Auburn, he says that Auburn has scrapped its home-and-home football series, also against UCLA, scheduled for 2027-2028. Football Scoop first to report that. Smitty, the only thing I can glean from reading this, and I have no advanced knowledge of this, but my guess is it will certainly be something that will be discussed next week, or at least asked about, is the SEC has got to be preparing its teams for a 9-game football conference season.
It sounds like it. And, for a long time, this has been rumored to have happened, but then some of the power brokers in the SEC always found a way to stop it. And one of the reasons that was always given after the vote was, I'm sure it's a secret vote, and one of the reasons always given was, well, you want to protect all those non-conference rivalries like Clemson, South Carolina, like Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech. So if they go to a 9-game conference schedule, as you're pointing out, Chris, that would mean Clemson, South Carolina. That would mean that South Carolina had 10 games lined up and will only have 2 non-conference opponents. So what I think is going to be the victim of this, we are going to lose games like Clemson, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, Miami, games like that. If you're right, and I think if you're reading the tea leaves, I think it's hard to disagree that it sounds like the 9-game conference schedule is coming, then that would really mean that those types of games, the good kickoff games like the one we're going to get this year between Clemson and Georgia, those are the ones that are really in peril.
And that cannot be good for college football. None of this that we have seen happen over the last couple of years has been good for college football, but the fact that Clemson and Georgia won't play, and I don't fault the Bulldogs for not wanting to add Clemson to the schedule, makes perfect sense. I mean, you've got to give your team a break. And if you've already got 9 games in the toughest conference in the country, the worst thing you want to do is add another extremely hard game that you could lose. I certainly get that. But that can't be good for college football. It can't be good for our area of the country that South Carolina and North Carolina won't play. It can't be good. And here's the question you have to ask if you're Florida. When you have 2 teams that are not in your league, that are major Power 5 programs, do you look at alternating and playing Florida State once or twice and then drop Florida State and pick up Miami? Or do you just totally say, look to the University of Miami, we're never playing you again unless we get matched up in the playoffs or in bowl games?
Yeah, I think Florida will choose Florida State in that, just as South Carolina will choose to keep the Clemson rivalry alive. That's just, and they just won't be able to play. But you know what? I say those games are in peril. Maybe they'll play them anyway because, Chris, you said something earlier in the program, and it's not the first time you've said it, and it's not the first time we'd heard it outside of this show, which is you think that there's almost going to be a schism, a breakaway from the haves and have-nots, that the top 65 schools are going to break away from the rest of college football. If that's the case, you may entertain what Nick Saban's plan was. If for those who don't remember, I'll tell you, Nick Saban said that only the top schools should play the top schools. He never did that. He always would play Kent State or whomever. He said, because that's the situation we have. But the truth is the teams at the top of the food chain ought to just play the other teams at the top of the food chain, meaning the Power 5, now the Power 4, ought to just play each other. So in that case, those types of games would come back. But as it's currently constructed, where FCS games, what they call, those paycheck games, the money games, the guaranteed games, if that's going to be the case, then what you're pointing out, teams like South Carolina, teams that are kind of mid-tier SEC teams, if they're going to play a 9-game conference schedule and a good rival like Clemson or Florida playing Florida State, they're probably going to choose to play Western Carolina twice as their other non-conference games.
But my guess is it's not home and home, not Columbia one week and Cullowhee the next.
No, they'll just try to take on as many the SoCon Invitational as they. But you couldn't blame them, right?
No, not at all.
In that circumstance, you couldn't blame them. You can't tell South Carolina, as they're doing this year, you're going out to Oklahoma and you might, whatever, Texas A&M, you got whoever you've got, on a difficult schedule, and then tell them, oh yeah, well the conference needs additional exposure, so you need to play NC State on a Thursday night to kick off the season on Labor Day weekend.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. The SEC will be closing ranks, I think. I think if they what would happen is, and we now know this to be true because we've seen the emails between the ACC and Clemson, we know to be true, ESPN's going to dangle carrots, and maybe the SEC is giving ESPN that 9th conference game to appease them. Say, look, now you're going to get 9 SEC versus SEC matchups. We'll do what we want with the other games. Leave us alone.
And I think if I'm Furman and Wofford and the Charleston Southern, I think I love this because there's room for me on that schedule. And I think if you're Coastal Carolina and some of the teams in the Sun Belt, the Group of 5 leagues, there's room for them. My fear is ultimately when we get to the big conglomeration that I believe is coming of the power brokers, that all of those games for Furman and Wofford and Coastal and everybody else against South Carolina and Clemson are going to ultimately go away because they're only going to play one another. But for now, if the SEC does go to 9 games, South Carolina's other 2 available slots will be against somebody in the FCS, you can almost guarantee. And you hope it's either Furman or the Citadel or Wofford or Charleston Southern, somebody in our states, certainly help those schools. And then maybe you get Coastal. Maybe one year you play Georgia State, another year you play somebody else from the Group of 5, and you can slot those games in. And I think there's room for everybody then. Then you have an FCS game, you have a Group of 5 game, and then you have 10 full-time Power 5 games. That's a heck of a schedule. But I just can't see any other reason that Georgia will be canceling series, Florida will be canceling series in games that would be entertaining if the SEC has not already let them know, hey, look, this is coming, get ready. We're going to play 9 conference games.
I don't disagree with you. I think, as I said before about reading the tea leaves, I think you're onto something, Chris. And a few seasons ago, we saw Georgia and Notre Dame play a regular season game. If this comes to pass, Notre Dame will probably not play an SEC regular season game again, right?
No, yeah. There won't be room for them. And again, how is that good for college sports? And how is that good for college football? Because I've long been an advocate that Georgia and Clemson should play every year. That's just too good a game. I will say this. They should play every year in Athens and in Clemson, not in Atlanta. But that's another story for another day. But those games should happen. And I don't see where, if this happens and the current makeup stays the same, which again, I don't believe it will, so I don't know that the argument is worth mentioning. But if the current makeup is such, Georgia is not going to play Clemson, and I can't blame them because they already have, unless they can bump Georgia Tech off the list and pick up Clemson, and I doubt the Yellow Jackets are going to want that to happen.
Right, and not only are we talking about the consequences that we have not seen, the unseen consequences. Chris, we already have some consequences because we've already seen Auburn and Southern Cal and UCLA cancel games that we'll never get.
Good stuff tonight, folks. We appreciate you joining us. Be back here tomorrow at 6 o'clock.